Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. What's an experience that you had as a child that you didn't realize was super creepy until you were older? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was 6 years old. My mom and I lived on the second floor of an apartment complex. My mom and I just got out of an abusive household, and we were low on money. I was often bored, so to cure that I would put my ear to the floor and hear what's going on downstairs. My mom didn't mind. She was usually swamped with work, and as long as I didn't end up hurting myself, it was fine. One day I did this, and heard two people yelling and screaming at each other, a man and a woman. The man sounded very angry. The woman was crying and screaming. I got up and told my mom that there were people fighting. She looked up from her work and asked me some more questions. She eventually got up and told me she would be right back and to stay put. A while later, my mom comes back with the sobbing woman. My mom calls the cops, and they question all of us. She told us to have a good day and offered places for the woman to stay. I didn't understand until much later that woman was in an abusive relationship, and my mom told me I saved her life that day. The man had a knife and was cornering her. I had a friend when I was about 5 years old who always wore what I thought were really bright socks on her arms. I thought they were cool. I remember being confused that she called her parents by their names instead of mom and dad. I found out much later that it was because they were her foster parents, after her real father had held her in a bathtub of boiling water. Her rad socks were actually bandages that her foster parents tried to make a little more fun. I hope she's okay now. In 4th grade, my teacher's husband started coming to class to visit with her almost every day. Eventually, it turned into him singling me out in class, coming up to my desk and whispering in my ear. He would ask if I was doing my homework and being good. It progressed to him calling my teacher when he wasn't there and asking to speak to me on the phone. He'd tell me to do good work. I eventually realized that it was weird because I wasn't close with my teacher at all, and he wouldn't do this to anyone else in class. I told my parents, and they contacted the principal. I'm not sure what happened, but after I told my parents, I never saw or heard from him again. While babysitting us, my older brother, 10 years older than me, would play the knife game, where he chased me and my other siblings around the house with a butcher's knife until he caught one of us and held us down, trying to push the knife into our throat or stomach, while we pushed it away with all of our strength. My parents brushed it off, and it wasn't until he did it with an electric drill that ripped a hole in my shirt that they disciplined him over it. But he still did it every time he babysat us. I remember being a kid and worrying when my parents left if it was going to be a normal night where we ate pizza and watched a movie, or a terrifying night because my brother got bored and wanted to torment us. When I was around 6, my family rented a smaller house on a farm. The farm was way out of the way and had a long road that led to the main street. The owner of the land had a very smart and large German shepherd named Lady. I would hang out with her a lot. One day Lady took off, running all the way down the road, and I ran after her. So as I was convincing her to follow me back, a blue truck pulled up and a woman hopped out. She went on about Lady and how she used to own her when she was younger before putting her up for adoption. I don't remember much else of what she said. I responded here and there, but I do remember her offering to give me a ride up back to the house. The entire time, Lady stayed right in front of me, staring the woman down and not moving. The lady took a step forward. The lady just growled at her and stayed her ground. Eventually, the woman gave up trying to coerce me and left. That night, I mentioned it to my brother, saying that I had met Lady's previous owner, because at 6, I had no effing idea. He said, you know she was probably trying to kidnap you, right? Mrs. Anderson has had Lady since a young puppy. It didn't really hit me until I thought about it a few years ago. When a dog knows someone, especially a previous kind owner, they're usually pretty effing excited and greet them. But for her to protect me the way she did, it didn't even cross my mind. It's scary to think back on it. I think I'd agree with you. If a dog had all its faculties and realized that the person there was a former owner or, whatever, that they would somehow recognize them. And Lady did a great job. Good dog. I'm traveling on a coach with my mom, aunt, little sister, and cousin. 5-year-old Mia is looking out the window spot a guy in a convertible alongside the bus, and we lock eyes for a second. The car kinda slows and falls back out of sight before speeding up parallel to where I was in the bus again. The man's now holding a sausage in his lap and wiggling it at me. I think, weird, where'd he get that from? And proceeded to smile and wave like 5-year-olds do. I didn't realize I'd waved at some pedo's cock until I was about 17. When I was about 6, my dad began having an affair with a much younger woman. She ended up moving pretty close to us after breaking up with her boyfriend. Anyway, cut to Halloween, and we go around my very small neighborhood to trick or treat. After we finish up, my dad decides to take me to more houses. We end up driving to his girl's house. She gave me a full-size Snickers, and then she disappeared with my dad for a while. I still remember the blue light flickering from the TV as I sat alone in her living room. I never said anything to my mom until much later. I kind of knew what was going on and didn't want to hurt her. My dad has been married to this girl for almost 20 years now. She's my stepmom. My mom was 6 months pregnant when this was all happening. Oof. When I was 3 or 4, my dad's coworker tried to kidnap me. I was in a booster seat, and he was telling me about how he had a different cool booster seat, and wouldn't I like to ride in his truck? My dumbass was all concerned over the booster seat not being right, and then my dad walked out and asked what was going on, and decked the guy. I don't know why he would have tried that in the parking lot of my dad's work, but I remember this vividly. I grew up in a pretty small, quiet town. When I was about 8 or 9, I was riding my bike around the block while my mom and her friend visited. About 3 houses down from mine was a great big house that had been turned into a few apartments. One of the residents was a disabled man, and as I made another lap around, I saw him staggering through the front lawn of that building, muttering, and his whole body was wet and shiny with something red. I remember thinking that it looked like blood, but I just didn't really believe it could be. I bicycled straight home and, just in case, told my mom and her friend that either the man down the block was bleeding or maybe, more likely in my mind, covered in ketchup. My mom's friend looked over the fence and said, "My God, it's blood." My mom called an ambulance, but later that night she told me he died at the hospital because he had a disorder that didn't allow his blood to clot. It turned out he had been stabbed multiple times by another resident. The mom didn't use the word murder that I recall, and we didn't have a TV, so it wasn't a concept I really got. Our cat had kittens that same night, and I remember my mom talking about a balance between new lives being born and people dying. I remember being interested to me as a kid, but as an adult it seems pretty terrifying. I would be a lot more disturbed if I saw something like that now, with a more full understanding of morality, homicide, etc. I was 7. I had to pee really badly, but my mom was in the bathroom. After waiting and knocking and complaining, I went in without waiting for a response. I found my mom sitting on the toilet and slumping over, pale as hell. As calm as I can be, I called my aunt over, who freaks out and calls an ambulance. My mom was gone for over a couple of months. My family just told me she was traveling whenever I asked about her. Years later, I learned I screwed up my mom's suicide attempt, and she had been in a psych ward for months. I lived next to some super-duper Mormon people living in Utah. They were strict Mormons, and so the obey your parents because of the word of wisdom thing was deeply ingrained in their family. The kids did all of the chores around the house and got chore points to spend. They spent them on a list of rewards. There were some smaller ones, like 30 minutes on the computer, and some more expensive ones, like go on vacation to visit the cousins. Pretty normal stuff, right? Except for the one that said alone time with daddy. Well, 2 years after my family moved from that town, it turned out that their dad was arrested on 20-plus counts of molesting his poor kids. It haunts me to this day to think that I could have been a victim as well if my dad hadn't been questioning and suspicious about the guy from day one. My dad has a real-life spidey sense. When I was around 9, I went snow sledding with family and friends. It was a popular sledding area with a few different hills and some woods. This older guy in his 40s had an awesome toboggan with a flashlight rigged up to the front. He was flying down hills 10 times faster than anyone else. He was there by himself, and it was getting dark out. He came up to me and started telling me about the secret hill in the woods that was huge. He told me I could use his sled. I followed him for about 2 minutes until I realized I couldn't see my family or friends anymore. I was maybe 20 feet into the woods before I was overcome with a horrible gut-wrenching feeling. I dropped my sled and ran like hell back toward my family. I remember hearing his footsteps behind me, moving as quickly as I was. By the time I got to my family and told them, he had disappeared. I'm 100% certain I would have been molested or murdered in those woods. Telling this story makes me feel the way I did when I was 20 feet into those woods 21 years ago. Scary as...